This video will be a quick tutorial of how to grease your Shimano pedals. This is something that you should do about every 6 months if you ride often, or if you don't ride very often, about once a year. There's not a lot that you'll need to do this service. You'll just need a rag or some paper towels, a wrench to get the pedals off the bike, which I'll show you in a minute. In this case, this is a newer style Shimano pedal, so it uses an 8mm Allen wrench. If you have an older style, you may need a pedal wrench or an open-ended wrench to get the pedals off the bike. Also, if you have an older style, to get the spindle off, you're going to need this Shimano TL-PD40 little plastic tool. Probably just be a couple bucks at your bike shop. The newer style, you use a 17mm wrench, and you're also going to need some grease, some good high quality grease. I use Fill Wood for this type of application, but any good high quality grease will work. And you'll need something to hold the pedal still. A vise works great. I don't have a soft jawed vise, so I just use this little pad to keep the pedal from getting damaged. Okay, to get the pedals off the bike, the most important thing to remember when getting pedals off a bike is the right pedal is a normal counterclockwise rotation to loosen it. The left pedal is a reverse thread, so you'll have to go in a clockwise motion to get the pedal off the bike. And let me just say real quick here that pedals do not need to be that tight on a bike. I see this is probably one of the most over-tightened components on a bike. You really don't need to use a lot of force when tightening pedals. So mine are usually not that tight. So I'm just going to use my 8mm wrench to get the pedal off the bike. Now again, I said if you have an older style, it's not going to have an Allen bolt on the other side, so you're just going to put a wrench on the pedal. A pedal wrench would be preferable if you have one. So I just twist it off, and if you have a SRAM crankset, you're going to have this little washer, so don't lose that washer. Now just put the pedal in the vise or whatever you're going to use to hold it tight, and don't tighten the vise too tight if you're using one. It's just tight enough to keep it from dropping out, to steady it while we get the spindle off. Okay, now just take your 17mm wrench. Another thing that's important for this is on the right pedal, it was a normal thread to get it off the bike. To get the spindle out, it's a reverse thread. And then the left pedal is a normal thread. So I'm going to turn this clockwise, and that's not very tight. Tighten up my vise a little bit more. And then after it goes a couple rotations, it's kind of stiff, so you can't really just finger loosen this. You got to keep the wrench on there. That's normal. I've noticed that with all the Shimano pedals. So it'll be real loose for a couple rotations and then a little bit stiff, just stiff enough where you cannot do it with your fingers. So all we've done now is pull the spindle out. Now, I said this is going to be the quick way of greasing. You can also break this down, and that's a topic for another video. You can loosen these cone bolts and get to the bearings. There's 24 bearings, 12 on each side, and you can actually pull those apart. But if you don't have like a lot of grit and roughness in your pedals, you really don't need to do that. That's a lot more time consuming and tedious to do that. This is just the real quick way to grease your pedals and get back to riding. Alright, now that we've got the spindle out, we're going to take a rag or paper towel. I like using a paper towel because it's thinner, and I make a little tip and put some degreaser. I use just plain old rubbing alcohol, and I didn't show degreaser as one of the items that you're going to need, but you're going to need some kind of degreaser. You can use WD-40 as a degreaser. Doesn't make a good lube, but it's a decent degreaser. So I just make a tip, just kind of push it down in there. Tighten my vise a little bit more. Just kind of turn it around. You can also take a screwdriver if you want, or something to push the paper towel or rag down in there a little bit more. Just be careful. Don't hit your threads when you do that. So twist it around and just get some of that old grease out. Okay, now just take your spindle and clean that off too. Again, I'm going to use rubbing alcohol. And just get the old grease off. Get the threads clean. And just wipe it down real good. it's a good idea to check. You've got a little rubber gasket here to keep water from getting inside the pedal, and just make sure that's not damaged. Kind of be hard to damage, but if it is damaged, then you probably have some dirt inside your pedal and you need to replace that and do like a full overhaul on this spindle. So I've got all the old grease off as best I can without fully disassembling. Now it's time to just grease things back up. I'm going to put some lube down inside the pedal a little bit, and not too much, because if you put too much it's all going to come squirting out when you tighten it back up. I'm just going to take a screwdriver and just kind of push it down in there a little bit. You can also, if you want to use something like this that squirts grease down in there, this is for suspension pivots, but it would work well in this application. But I like using the Philwood waterproof for this. Now with the spindle, I'm just going to put some grease on here, and I'm going to try to work it down into the bearings. Again, this is the way to do the service without pulling these bearings out. So I've got it down in there. Same thing at the top bearings. Just kind of work it down with your fingers. Put some grease on the threads. It's time to put it back in. Now this one happens to be the left pedal, so this is a normal thread. Just again, remember, left pedal coming off the bike is a reverse thread, but getting the spindle out is a normal thread, and the right pedal is the opposite. So just going to turn this, tighten it back up. As you tighten it, you're going to see some of the old grease, maybe some of the new that you put in there, come squirting out the top. That's normal. You want to just keep an eye on that little rubber gasket to make sure that it doesn't pop out as the grease is coming out. So just kind of take your fingers and check that, make sure that that gasket is staying in there. Now this doesn't have to be crazy tight. Just snug it up real good. These are, I think they're aluminum threads, so if you over tighten it you could strip those. So just snug it up, and again make sure that rubber gasket hasn't come out. And then I'm just going to take my rag, make sure the threads are clean, clean the body if you need to. And then it's not a bad idea while you have the pedal in your hand to just check these screws. These are Phillips, so I'm just going to go around and make sure these are snug. Some of the older pedals are, I think, some Allen bolts, but I'm just going to go around again, make sure these are snug. There's no problems. If they are loose, it's probably a good idea to back them out and put some Loctite on them. And then finally, again, I didn't show this in the beginning, but spray lube. Probably a good idea to just put some spray lube on the body of the pedal. And now, just add a little bit of grease to the threads, put it back on your crank arm, and you're good to go.